You're good.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Corey. It's nice to virtually meet all of you, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'm here with Patty as well.
Hi, everybody.
And this session is kind of putting the ribbon on our Ready, Set, Grad School series. And it's all about acing your admissions interviews. So this is a great session if you are planning on going to grad school, if you already have an interview lined up with grad admissions, or even with if you have like a meeting with a faculty member at the institution you're looking into. It's really hopefully you'll find it helpful, and it'll give you some good tips on how to prepare and ace your admissions interview. So we'll just get started, and feel free to drop any questions in the chat box. So first, the purpose of the interview. So an interview obviously provides an opportunity to let the admissions committee know who you are in person, not just on paper. So at this point, they've gotten your resume, they've gotten your personal statement, your application package. The interview just takes it a step further. And not every grad program will offer interviews, but if you have the chance to do one, definitely take it. Sometimes they're optional, but by choosing to interview, you are showing that you're really interested in the institution and the program. And it's also a great opportunity to present the characteristics about you that can't be conveyed on an application or a resume or in test scores. It's also a great way for you to see if the program or the people in the program, the faculty, would be a good fit for you as well. So not only are they interviewing you, but you're also going to be interviewing them. So if you have the opportunity, definitely take an interview. So what to expect with an interview? It's really going to depend on the program and the institution. All graduate school interviews will look a little bit different. So be sure to ask for those details. So you might want to ask, who am I meeting with? How are the conversations going to be taking place? So for example, now, obviously, a lot more interviews are happening virtually, whereas in the past, they were probably more in person. You might want to ask, will the interviewers have access to your application so you can know what they already know about you? Maybe there is going to be a schedule of some sort. You know, sometimes grad admissions interviews are just an interview with one person for, 30 minutes, whereas other times it can be an entire day, including, meeting with various faculty, getting a tour of the campus. You might be involved in a panel interview of some sort, and that can go both ways. So you might be interviewing with multiple faculty, just you on your own, or one faculty or grad admissions rep might be interviewing multiple students at a time. So it could really go either way. And you also might get to meet current students in the program. So it's just such a great opportunity to get a sense of the culture within the program. Those interactions with the current students are so invaluable because they're going to give you a point of view from that ground floor where you're going to be entering into the program. So you want to gauge, are they excited about the program? What do they have to say about the curriculum and the faculty? They are such a valuable person to speak with because they're literally living what you're applying to. And
Corey, can I add to that?
yeah.
One thing we found from a lot of our students that have gone through this process of interviewing with graduate and professional schools, they found that oftentimes those who are interviewing them didn't necessarily read through all of their documents. So there might be a student interviewer, or it might be a faculty member that's interviewing that didn't necessarily read through your application. So don't assume that they have read through your resume and your personal statement, et cetera. You want to treat it as if they're coming in with a blank slate. So keep that in mind too.
And just a side note, let's say you find out who you're going to be meeting with, and maybe there's a faculty member that isn't on your schedule, but you would like to meet with them. You can inquire about setting up a separate meeting. I think that just kind of goes above and beyond, and it shows, you're obviously very interested in the program. So keep that in mind too. Okay. Oops. Okay. So before the interview, you almost want to treat this like a job interview in a way. So you want to be sure to research about the program's curriculum, the program requirements, not only to be admitted into the program, but to also like what requirements are you going to have to complete within the program. So a lot might require clinical hours or an internship or something like that. So that's always good to ask about. And also, you might want to look into the different faculty in the program and their specialties in research, especially if it lines up with something you're interested in. That's obviously, that would be a great connection. And you just want to be sure to prepare and prioritize a list of questions to ask during the interview as well. And you're only going to be able to do that through research. So, go onto the school's website, look, just Google, see if they've been in the news lately. It's very similar to preparing for a job interview.
And most of these websites, they have a fast facts, FAQ pages. So you don't necessarily need to know every little accolade and every single accreditation. But if you could just familiarize yourself with like the stuff that they like to boast about the most, that's plenty. And you can also make mention of a faculty member that you have interest in researching with and collaborating with in some capacity, even if they're not part of the interview. So don't feel like you have to find commonality with those who are assigned to you to interview. They're just as happy to hear that you're interested in someone else that's a part of that department. So don't feel like you have to sort of mold yourself accordingly.
Perfect. So again, this is still before the interview. You want to prepare. So be sure to ask what the schedule is, what type of interview it's going to be. Again, I already touched on this, but panel versus individual interview, the dynamic will really change. So it's important to know what you're walking into. I also think it's important to practice interview questions. So you can do that by scheduling a mock interview with your career coach, or use our online resource, Big Interview, which also has grad school admissions question banks in there. So that's a great resource to look into. And
I'll throw it into the chat box.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And honestly, practice is just the most important thing. And this goes for a job interview, for a grad admissions interview. You just want to rehearse like commonly asked questions and be ready to explain why you're pursuing this advanced degree. It's so important to know your qualifications, your strengths, your weaknesses. Be prepared to speak about your past achievements, as well as lessons learned from any past missteps, and be able to articulate your reason for applying to this program. Because they want to be sure that you're going to be a good fit, a good match, that you're passionate about the subject you're about to study. So it's really just important to practice those interview questions. And obviously you don't want to sound rehearsed when you're answering them, but you also don't want to sit there and go, just have some, if you get some practice in, it'll just make the whole process go so much more smoothly. And questions will be broken out into different categories. So we kind of listed them here. So you may be asked to describe yourself. It's that classic, can you tell me a little bit about yourself question. You should be ready to speak on your professional goals, any academic experiences that are relevant to what you're pursuing. Problem solving and leadership skills both are valued in graduate school. So if you can speak on any examples or anecdotes showing that you have strong critical thinking, problem solving skills, or leadership skills, that would be great. And of course, the behavioral questions. So can you tell me about a time when, maybe you had to take on a leadership role, when you had to step up? Can you tell me about a time when you had to, maybe when you had a mentor or professor that you didn't get along with? It'd be good to come up with examples for all of these types of questions.
Corey, can I add something here?
Yes.
The one thing that we've taken away from all of the interviews that students have told us they went through is that faculty and graduate admissions representatives and department program chairs, whatever they may refer to them as, really what they care about most is how intentional you are about the grad program that you are pursuing. So what I mean by that is they want to make sure that you're taking this seriously, that you're pursuing this degree because you really want to. So for those of you in the room that are underclassmen, this is a great opportunity for you, because when you get to this stage, they're going to say, well, why do you want to be an SLP? Why do you want to go into finance? And you could say, well, I've had this intention for so many years, and while at SHU, I took advantage of this academic club, and I, collaborated with this faculty member on research, and I did all of these things. So you don't have to then explain, well, this is why I want to do it, without having all these wonderful experiences to back up your reasoning. And for those of you who are at the tail end, just reflect on that, because it's certainly something that across the board, no matter what industry you're interested in, that question will come up in a graduate admissions interview for sure. Why do you want to work in this industry, and why do you want this career or profession? So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and they're going to be able to sense if you made this decision on a whim, which isn't, we don't recommend that. Grad school should not be taken lightly. It's a big time commitment. It's a big money commitment. Patty and I have both gone through grad school. It's not something to be taken lightly. So, and they're trying to get a sense of, why are you here? Why are you committing to this? So just be sure you yourself know your reasoning behind it. Okay. Go. Oops. So during the interview, so let's say you secured the interview, you know the format it's going to be in. So number one, you want to be sure to dress professionally. So you only have one chance to make a first impression, and visual appearance is a big part of that. So, put on your suit, come in looking clean, put together. If it is a virtual interview, do the same thing. You can obviously wear jeans on the bottom, they won't know, but I think it's very important to still dress professionally, even if it is a virtual interview, and make sure your background is professional looking. You don't want to be like laying in bed doing an interview. So just make sure you're in a good setting for that as well. You'll also want to arrive a little bit early. So again, if doing a virtual interview, I would say log onto the platform that's being used maybe 2 to 3 minutes early, nothing too crazy. If it's an in-person interview, maybe 10 to 15 minutes early, definitely not any earlier than that. That's plenty of time. It's also always a good idea to confirm the location and the time with whoever is coordinating your interview. So, be sure to ask about parking details, if you have to get parking permit validated, anything like that. So just sort all those details out prior to your interview. You'll also want to bring any necessary documents. So, granted, you've already submitted an application package. So ideally they have all these things, but I think it's always a good idea to bring extra copies of your resume, transcripts, test scores, and any other supplemental documents just in case. And then I also think it's so important to maintain good eye contact. Even in a virtual interview, in a panel interview, you just want to stay really present and try and be confident and be yourself. And eye contact makes a big difference with that. So, and I know within a panel interview, it can be very difficult to know where to look, but try and just focus on whoever asked you the question, look to them. And as far as like virtual interviews, I know it's natural to be like looking at yourself in your own camera, but I think it goes a long way to try and look at that. I do it all the time. When you see me looking over, I'm looking at myself, but try and look at the camera, because it feels unnatural, but I mean, I think it'll look better within the interview. So
now there's two different types of panel interviews. If you're curious, there's one where there's going to be a line of faculty interviewing you, right, as one individual candidate, but there's also interviews where you'll be with peers that are also applying into the program, and that could be what they refer to as a group interview. So if that's the case, be sure that you're engaging your fellow applicants as well, so your peers, because it just shows that you would be, a team player, that you're very collaborative, that you're really engaging the entire room and not just giving all of your attention to the interviewer. That's pretty important piece. And then we oftentimes, our students like, well, I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to email ahead of time and ask all these logistical questions about parking and about who will be interviewing me and about et cetera. That's perfectly acceptable. And if anything, it shows that you truly are interested and you're purposeful in your approach on how you're going to handle this upcoming interview. So please don't feel like you're a bother with emailing whomever it is that's coordinating the interview to ask additional questions,
Mhm.
especially about parking if it is in person. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that point that you made about engaging with other applicants if it's that sort of panel interview. Because just like with a job interview, as soon as you walk into that building, just you're being interviewed from the moment you step in. They're going to kind of have an eye on you. So if you happen to be in like a waiting room with a group of your other applicants and you're kind of sitting alone on your phone, that's not a great look. So even though you're all competing with each other to get into this program, at the same time, you're also going to potentially be peers together. So um, I think it's important to all like get along, the adults obviously, but if you can show that you're able to speak to others and you're inclusive and all that, I think that's just the type of person they would want in their program.
And Corey, I don't know if you mentioned this in a later slide. I don't want to mention it, but did you discuss the idea of being able to write notes during the interview?
No, I didn't, but that's a good point. Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking, that's a question I get often, can I take notes during the interview? Is that unprofessional? You absolutely can take notes as long as you maintain a consistent eye contact during a graduate admissions interview or a job interview or an internship interview. You can take notes. You can come with notes prepared. You can come with a list of questions prepared, written down. You could come with a list of key ideas you want to get across to the interviewer or key successes. So it's perfectly acceptable to do so. We just ask that you put it in a nice Padfolio, right, or in a notepad that has like a clean, plain folder to wrap it up with a bow.
Perfect. So now these next few slides, they're kind of going into what sorts of questions that you might be asked. Keep in mind, these are all very general. We don't know the background of all of you in this session. So obviously, if you know what kind of grad program you are applying to, that you can definitely do a Google search or even on Big Interview to see what types of questions might be more for that industry, that program that you are interviewing for. But these are just some great general questions and we broke them out. So this group is called Describing Yourself, which sometimes is the hardest part of an interview. So that first question, tell me about yourself. I would always have an answer prepared for that. If you are starting from scratch, a great way to think about it is past, present, and future. So and keep it career related or industry related, whatever grad program you're applying to. Talk about what you've done in the past that's relevant to this program. What are you currently doing and what are your future goals? I think that's a great little formula to use if you're kind of starting from scratch. Obviously, you'd want to include any major successes or accomplishments that you're super proud of, again, that are relevant to the program you're applying to. But keep it 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be super long. Don't go off on a tangent. Keep it focused on the grad program and relevant experiences that you've had with that. And obviously, if you need help coming up with one, that's when you reach out to your career coach. You also might want to be aware of some strengths and weaknesses that you have. They probably won't outright ask, like, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? But they might ask some questions that kind of lead them to those types of answers. So, be aware of maybe some things that you're very good at, if you, something that you're really proud of, that's part of your personal brand, and maybe keep in mind a couple of things that you are trying to work on. And just keep in mind that when you do share a weakness, you want to kind of flip it into a positive in a way. So if it's something you're actively working on, be sure to share that.
And if any of you are curious as to whether or not something that you've already thought about as an area of growth, right, not necessarily weakness, but you wanted to throw it at us today, please feel free to unmute during the Q&A and ask us. I was thinking about this as a potential weakness. We'd be happy to tell you whether or not it would fly, for sure.
And we'll just go through these other questions. So what do you believe your greatest challenge will be if you're accepted in this program? That obviously will require some reflection and some research. So, it's important. This is why it's important to be familiar with their curriculum, with their program requirements, just so you're not going in blind. How would your professors describe you? Describe your greatest accomplishment. Why should we choose you over another candidate? That kind of goes back to personal branding questions, like what sets you apart from other people in your field. And I know that can be difficult to come up with, but again, that's when you should meet with your career coach and we can talk about it. Are you motivated? And again, keep that, focused on the grad program. So, explain and provide some examples. Maybe you went above and beyond in a certain class relevant to this grad program. Maybe you did a lot of volunteer work. And again, what volunteer experiences do you have? And what contributions have you made to your department or school? Because they're trying to get a feel for how you're going to be in their program, like what are you going to contribute to their department? What, they want obviously students that are going to, represent their program well. So that's kind of what they're getting at with those sorts of questions.
And what's great about some of those questions that Corey provided is two things. One, some of those can be flipped, right? So when we're asking questions to the interviewer at the end, because you want to have questions prepared, and we'll talk about that. Some of those, if they're not asked of you can ask of them, right? What is going to be my biggest challenge in the program? So it's just a tremendous list, and we'll be sure to share all of these with you on our website as well, so you can refer to it later. But again, I'm going back to the point where, it's so important for underclassmen, if you're in the room, to looking at these questions, reflect on, am I doing enough, right, to prepare myself for these competitive graduate and or PhD programs, right? And then the other thing is too, which is just so you know, this list doesn't come from just us. This is from graduate admissions professionals, experts. It comes from past students who have given us testimonials about what questions they were asked during interviews across various industries. So just so you know where this list came from.
So here are some questions in regards to professional goals. So if you're not accepted into graduate school, what are your plans? That might be a difficult question to answer, but ideally you all have a backup plan if you are planning on applying to graduate school. I mean, I'll speak from experience. I applied to some Reach graduate schools the first time I applied, and I didn't get in. So I started doing some volunteer work that was relevant to the field. So I think it's always great to kind of have a plan B. Why did you choose this career? Again, that just goes back to, why are you pursuing this program? They just want to be sure that, you're pursuing it for the right reasons, not just to go to grad school or just to fill a couple of years because I can't find a job because of COVID. Those are not good reasons. So just be sure that your motivation for pursuing this program is, good. How will you be able to make a contribution to this field? What are your career goals? How will this program help you achieve your goals? I think that's a big one. How do you intend to finance your education? And what do you plan to specialize in? So just all questions that honestly are good to have an answer to, whether you're interviewing or not. I think financing education is huge. A lot of schools will have graduate assistantships and TA positions that might help supplement the cost of it, but I think it's important to kind of figure that out beforehand. And if your career path does have specializations, it'd be great if that program that you're interviewing with has that specialization. So I wouldn't say you're planning on specializing in something that the program you're interviewing with does not have. That might not be a great idea. So it goes back to just, researching and knowing what you're getting into. So here are some questions regarding academic experience. So in college, what courses did you enjoy the most, the least, and why? Describe any research projects you've worked on. And again, if the more that you can keep this focused on the sort of program that you're applying to, the better. So in what ways have your previous experiences prepared you for graduate study in our program? Tell me about your experience in this field. What skills do you bring? How will you contribute? It's really just, these are just questions that should help you start reflecting on your past 4 years at Sacred Heart. and it might, if you're younger, if you're not quite ready to apply to grad school, this might help you figure out how you can improve on your academic experience to make you a more viable candidate. So maybe you will start doing research with a faculty member. Maybe you will start, taking more classes like relevant to this field as your supplemental courses. So it's and then if you could change one thing about your undergraduate college, what would it be? Again, if you are providing any answers like that, just be sure that they end on a positive note. You don't want to come across as like a Debbie Downer. You want to, keep the whole interviewing experience positive. So.
And when you're talking about your academic experience, I know a lot of admissions folks, they'd love to hear about those classes that you didn't do so hot in. So if you are afraid to talk about that course that you got that C in, and it's the only C you have on your transcript, don't be afraid, because they actually want to hear about, what you did to support getting through the course, whether it be going for extra help, etc. And on top of that, those are the best letters of recommendation as well. So if you are considering who to ask for letters of recommendation, I highly suggest asking that faculty member that was your most challenging course to write you a letter of rec if you did your due diligence to go to the office hours and to work with that person to get through the course and etc. So it's just it's just a suggestion for you.
Okay, and then we have questions that in regards to problem solving and leadership. So, and these will probably be more of those behavioral questions. So explain a situation in which you had a conflict and how you resolved it. What would you do differently and why? Keep in mind that any examples that you provide to answer these questions, they don't have to just be from academic or internship examples. It could also be maybe you were president of your sorority or fraternity. Maybe you held an exec board position in an organization or club. You can also pull from those experiences as well, and volunteer experiences.
Yeah, diversify your answers as much as you can, guys, and use even part-time jobs. It doesn't have to be relevant to this particular program. You can go and use any examples. I know that's sometimes the hardest thing, especially for our athletes. Every example that they give about challenges and successes tend to gravitate towards something that took up so much of their time. So you really do have to try and think outside the box to think about, community service and clubs and part-time jobs and your work study and your time studying abroad. So I'm glad Corey mentioned that, because that's so important for sure. And also for this particular slide, any of you in the room that's interested in health professions and law, these types of questions tend to come up a lot in graduate admissions interviews if they're offered.
Okay. And last we have, the questions when it will be your turn to ask. So again, just like a job interview, at the end of a grad admissions interview, chances are they will ask, do you have any questions for us? So just some notes on that. Obviously, don't ask any questions that may have already been answered, which is why it's so important to have a good arsenal of questions in your back pocket. So in case, your first two questions that you were going to ask were already answered, you have a backup 3. So here are just some examples. And again, these are all very general, but I think they would fit pretty much any grad interview. So maybe you want to, and I love this one, maybe you want to ask about your interviewer's educational path, like how did they end up within this program? What do they look for on an application? Do they prefer work experience, seeing that on your application package? What's the culture or environment of the school and or program? What financial assistance is offered? What kind of experiential learning opportunities are there? Where have alumni of the program gone? That could be a good question for current students, because they might have a better idea of, where their past peers are now working. What will be my biggest challenges when beginning this program? So really, when I see a spelling error, I'm sorry. But really any sort of questions that are on your mind that weren't already answered are game, as long as they're not inappropriate, obviously.
Yeah, and we like to tell students it's a delicate balance between asking questions about how you would benefit from the program and how the program would benefit from you being in it. So you want to ask questions where, how can I actively contribute to this program? And also, is this program a good fit for me? If you balance between the two, then that's a really robust, rich group of questions that you prepared. So I would cherry pick from this list based on that.
Okay. And then after the interview, it's always good practice to send a thank you note or an email to everyone that you've met with. And if you can include something in that note or email that was specific to something you spoke about with that person, I think that's always a really nice touch. I would avoid sending a generic thank you email, copy paste to everyone you met. I would try and remember some things that you spoke about during the day. And also this thank you note and email is a great opportunity to, again, add anything that you may have forgotten to mention in their interview. It's a great spot to just kind of say, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention I, completed this project and I think it would, benefit the program greatly, something like that. Also keep in mind that if the interview did not go as well as you planned, and you believe that the cause of that bad interview had nothing to do with you, that you should contact the admissions office immediately. And obviously don't be accusatory or argumentative, but just be straightforward and let the staff know what happened and ask if you can re-interview. But I wouldn't wait to do that. I would try and email them as soon as possible.
Yeah, email within 24 hours and make sure that you email each person separately.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, if there were student interviewers, you do email them as well.
Mhm. And just some last tips here for a winning interview. Again, practice your answers, and you can practice these questions with a friend, with your parents, with us. I mean, whoever, in front of your mirror, on Big Interview, you can record yourself answering them. So I think practice makes perfect. Again, you want to think of relevant personal stories. So be sure to refer to your resume, pull different examples from different experiences. It's really important. Interview your interviewers, because again, remember, you're trying to find out, is this program going to be a good fit for me too? So, ask them about the culture, ask them if they enjoy being a part of the program. Remember, you're always being interviewed, so just be on your A game from the moment you walk into that building or into the Zoom room, and just be yourself too, because at the end of the day, you want to be genuine, you want to be sure it is going to be a good fit for both you and the program, and you can only do that by being yourself. So that's all our information. Are there any questions? Anything you want to run by us?
You could feel free to use the chat or you can unmute. It's really up to you while you think of your questions. I just wanted to do a quick plug. If any of you are interested in PhD programs, but you're not in your senior year yet, there is a fantastic summer opportunity. It's called the SURF program through Yale University. I'm going to drop in some information about that in the chat, but I will also be emailing you some content about that program if you did want to explore it a bit. Any questions, guys? No pressure.
Oh, we have one.
Oh, sorry, did I miss that?
It just dropped in the chat. So it says, do you have any tips for if you get stuck on a question during an interview, or any tips to make sure you don't get stuck on a question that you don't know how to answer?
That's a really good question.
So first, I would say if you are stuck on a question, you can take a minute to kind of compose yourself. That's perfectly fine. You're only human. You're not a robot. And obviously, you can't predict every question that they're going to ask. So if you need to kind of take a minute, ask for it. Be like, can I have a minute to think about that, to reflect on that? That's fine. I wouldn't go any longer than like 30 seconds though. If you genuinely don't have an answer, be honest. I wouldn't, ever try and make something up or, scrape the bottom of the barrel to just try and give an answer.
You can also ask for clarification too. So you can say, oh, can you clarify your question? Or is this what you mean by this question? It's okay to ask follow-up questions to make sure you're truly understanding what they're asking. And then after you attempt to answer it, you can also say, did I answer your question
Mhm.
correctly or fully, or do I need to elaborate? So that's okay too.
Mhm.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, and
Thank
it
you.
happens, honestly, it'll happen, but I think, by preparing, by running through your practice questions, by doing your research, you're gonna lessen the chances of that happening, um, so just prepare, and you should be fine.
Anyone else have any questions? You guys have been so attentive. Thank you for that. All right. Well, we
Good.
appreciate your time. Thank you, Corey,
Oh, yeah.
for hosting our final session of the semester. And just to mention it once more, if any of you need assistance on graduate school advisement, anything from preparing for your interview to the application process to reviewing and brainstorming personal statements, please feel free to reach out to us at any point. We'll drop our emails in the chat box as well.
Yes.
All right, great. So I'm going to stop the recording.